In this short video, we're going to take a look at masks. Now, masks in Photoshop are very similar to masks in the real world. We use them to either hide or reveal different elements of something. So in the context of post-production, we might use masks when we're bringing in multiple images to create a composite made up of many different elements, and we'll use those masks to refine our selections around the elements that we're bringing in. We can also use them with adjustment layers. So for example, if we have an adjustment which adds contrast, but we only want to apply it selectively, we can just brush in the areas where we want that contrast to be revealed, where we want that adjustment to be revealed. So to demonstrate, I'm going to keep it very simple and just add a new layer. So I have a new blank layer and I am going to fill it using the paint bucket with my foreground color. So I have two layers, one is my background image and one is my teal fill color. I'm going to add a layer mask, and we do this using the layer mask icon at the bottom of the layers palette. And you can see I've just added my layer mask. I now have a second thumbnail. And this is very important to remember to keep checking over here into your layers palette to know what you are working on. You can see I have a white bounding box at the moment around my layer mask. This tells me that my layer mask is active. Anything I do is going to happen on the layer mask itself. If, however, I wanted to modify the image data, so the actual content of this layer, I will need to click on that thumbnail, and now you see the bounding box has shifted. If I wanted to come in to, for example, to shift the hue of that layer, I can do so, but I must be on the actual layer content thumbnail to do so. So let's look back at the actual mask. So again, to do so, I have to jump back over and activate my layer mask icon. So at the moment we saw when I added that layer mask, nothing changed. My layer of fill color is still there as it was before. And that's because my layer mask by default has come on as a white mask. And when we're working with a mask, white reveals and black hides. So the parts of my layer mask which are white will reveal the content of the layer. If I switch to black and again fill my mask with black, the parts of my mask which are black will hide that layer. So that layer is currently hidden. Again, if I switch back to white and fill with white, it's revealed again. So it's not erasing any of the pixels, it's simply hiding them. And that's better for us in terms of working non-destructively. That image data is still there. Rather than erasing something and the pixels having been gone, we can just keep modifying our mask until it's refined to the point that we need it to be. So it's pretty boring just filling that whole mask with black or white. So I'll just switch over to the brush tool and start to paint. So if I was to start painting on my layer mask, we know that black hides part of the image, which it's done there. And if I switch back to white, we know that white reveals my image again, my layer again. So those parts of the layer are coming back. So that's working with 100% opacity. What if I was to swap down to something around halfway, around 50-ish%? Again, I'm going to hide some of my layer. So painting in a 50% grey on my mask. And if you look at my mask, you can see that that shape there that I've painted is reflected in terms of what is hidden or revealed on the actual layer. And the effect here is going to be accumulative. So I'm painting with 53% of black, which is a mid-grey. As I keep adding, as I keep painting, adding more density there, I'm coming up to more of a solid opaque black. So if I just hide that background layer there, you can see that we have some semi-opaque, so some semi-transparent parts of my pink layer are visible, and in the middle it's been completely hidden. So using that layer mask, I'm able to control the intensity of which something is hidden or revealed. Let's move on to an example of using masks with adjustment layers. If I wanted to do some color manipulation on this image here. I'm going to add an adjustment layer. So I'll add a hue saturation adjustment layer. So I have my new layer here, and you can see that when we add an adjustment layer, it automatically adds that layer mask for us. We don't need to come down the bottom and do it. So I want to give my adjustment some settings. I'm going to click on the actual icon. So rather than having a thumbnail for the layer content, because it's an adjustment, I have an icon representing the adjustment itself. So I'm going to click on the icon, and I'm going to, what will I do? I will colorize. Come to about here. Actually, let's make it really obvious. I'm going to create something which colorizes everything below it. So I want something that's going to stand out as obvious. So if I just wanted, for example, to have some purple trees through here, I'm not going to sit around and paint everything else out, because that would be a bit of a waste of time. Instead, it would make more sense to start with a black mask so that it hides everything, and then I just selectively paint back in the little bits which I want to reveal. So I could do that a few ways. I could use my paint bucket and fill with black, or what I find faster is to go up to Image Adjustments and Invert. So the invert is just the opposite. So the opposite of white is black. So Command I on a Mac or Control I on Windows inverts for us. So I will use my paintbrush tool. I'm going to hit X to toggle my foreground background color because I want to paint in white. I'm using my square brackets to change the size of my brush. And I'm just going to paint in here these lovely purpley blue trees. Okay. So you get the idea there. And again, obviously, I can drop the opacity on the entire layer there, or I could have painted with a much softer opacity of the brush there. If you've made a mistake and you want to start again, Command A or Control A on Windows to select all, hit the delete key, and it clears off your mask for you. So now I could go down to, say, 30% and just brush in gently this time. If you want to see what you have actually drawn on your mask, you can hit the backslash key, which is usually above your return key on the keyboard, and this shows you the areas which you've drawn in. So I could continue to paint here, adding opacity as I go over something multiple times, and just toggling on the mask. So that's just my ruby lith mask, which is an indicator of where I've drawn. And again, that's not a very practical application because I don't really want purple trees. In the real world, I would probably be doing something like adding contrast selectively. I don't normally use the contrast tool, but it's quick for this. So I'm going to increase the contrast quite a bit. That's too much and I only want it in certain areas, so I'm going to hit Command I to turn it off. I'm going to add it a little bit over a lot of the image, so 30% and a big brush. Just add it up here a little. I like that. And then I'm just going to add it a bit more selectively here. So again, turning my ruby lith mask on, you can see that I'm going heavier on certain areas. And if this was an image I really wanted to do a lot of work on, I would be zooming up and painting in really a lot more accurately, I guess. But you can see that's just giving me control. So rather than having to make a selection and apply a contrast adjustment to that, I'm coming in and I'm coming through and just painting it onto certain areas. And again, this is really rough, and if I did this in the real world, I wouldn't have any clients because it's quite a mess. I'm going to create a second video which shows you how I would actually modify those adjustments just to tweak them a bit. But if we turn that mask on again there, you can see these are the areas where it's come in heavier than others, and it's lighter up the top here. And if I turn it on and off, you can see the effect. So I love masks. I do a lot of what I do in my life as a commercial retoucher using masks. So whether that's creating lots of different adjustments and being very precise in terms of the different elements that I'm bringing out within an image, or whether I'm using it to composite different elements in, depending what the campaign is for. They're a great lifesaver. They let you make errors and go back and adjust them. So you can be a little bit rough if you're just doing a mock-up, and then you can come back and finesse everything to have it pixel perfect. They're very powerful, and I don't know what I would do without them, to be frank. So get your head around them, remembering that white reveals that part of a layer, black hides it completely, and a shade of grey is a semi-transparent opacity of that layer content. So open up some images and start having a play, both with layer masks and adjustment layer masks.